toen ik begon te schrijven, wist ik eigenlijk ook nog niet precies wat ik ging schrijven en in welke taal ik ging schrijven. Maar naarmate dat ik aan het schrijven was, werd het eigenlijk iets dat ik tot Fatima Mernissi wilde richten. En de ene keer dat ik haar ontmoet heb, was onze taal die we gebruikten Engels, dus het is in het Engels geworden. Ik denk dat ze Nederlands niet begrijpt. Oké. I have to begin with a confession. When I met you, Fatima, and this was in 2004, I had lost the thrill I experienced when I first read you about 10 years before. And I remember that thrill vividly. Somehow I got a copy of Achter de Sluier, Beyond the Veil, and I devoured it. I devoured the book not because I agreed with every single word written in it, although in all honesty, that is something I say with more confidence now. I'm not entirely sure if I would have said that at that time. I devoured the book because I had just graduated with a sociology degree from a Flemish university, sociology of religion and culture, and I was eager to continue studying religion and gender. And at the time, I had not encountered one single text about women, nor Islam, nor women and Islam in my training of a sociologist of religion. I repeat, I graduated in 1993 as a sociologist of religion in Flanders, who happened to have a strong interest in gender, and my course readings had not included one text on Islam nor gender. I devoured Beyond the Veil, page after page, reading about women, about gender, about sexuality, about Islam, and about Christianity. It's an interesting book about Christianity as well. I devoured it like somebody's first glass of water after a waterless journey through the desert. 10 years later, Fatima, I met you. I met you at a milestone in my own personal life, when I was defending my doctorate at Utrecht University. A doctorate on women in Christian and Islamic movements in Europe, which meant that by then I had read piles and piles of texts on women and Islam and Christianity. Beyond the Veil had lost its special status, its special sweet taste of fresh cold water in a dry, thirsty mouth. Yet the perspective of meeting you was exciting, because of meeting a pioneer, a grande dame in one's field. Because one never forgets the one who offered water when one was thirsty. And because meeting somebody in the flesh whom one has only known on paper is a very special thing. There's a special kind of intimacy to reading, and especially when one is affected by the words one reads. Reasons enough to be excited, but I have to confess, Fatima, that by then your work was not central to the frameworks I needed to make sense of all the conversations I had had with pious Muslim and Christian women. You came to the Netherlands, Fatima, because you were honored that year, 2004, with the very prestigious Erasmus Prize, together with Abdul Karim Sarouche and Sadiq Al-Azm. And on precisely that same day, I had my public defense in Utrecht. The eve before your prize award ceremony, there was a public event in Amsterdam, which is where I first met you. And the day after your ceremony, you came to Utrecht and we had a seminar together. To me, it really felt as if my public defense was flanked by your presence like a good omen, like a guardian angel, the day before and the day after. The Erasmus Prize that year wanted to award important figures from the Islamic world. And I have to say we, and I was not alone here, like Nadia Fadil was with me, we could not help but notice the politics of the selection of the prize. In about the same time, Sabah Mahmoud's critical text on the politics of Islamic Reformation, a text called Secularism, Hermeneutics, and Empire, was published. A text in which she closely analyzed the political stakes of the hermeneutics of Sorouche. Fatima, I don't think you would have liked that text if you would have read it, and I don't think you read it. Yet I think that whatever more there is to say, and of course there always is more to say, that Sabah had a point. When we had our seminar in Utrecht, I wanted to talk about some of these things. I had prepared a question about the hijab. I had not been convinced about what you wrote about the headscarf in your more scholarly work. But hey, critique, disagreement, and debate is what scholarship is made of. No, that was not what bothered me most. What bothered me is what you wrote about the headscarf in your beautifully written and very moving biography, Fatima. And this is one of the places where our paths part. And I was actually going to find a quote, but I didn't have time. And now that I'm standing here, I actually think it's nice not to come up with one of these quotes that bothered me. Okay. So it just bothered me. And I wanted to bring this scholarly debate on the headscarf to our seminar, but you were brilliant. You were entirely brilliant in ditching my question. Yet despite the disagreements and despite you ditching my question, meeting you impressed me a lot. We met in the midst of a lot of nervousness. Do you remember? 2 days before your ceremony and before my doctoral defense, on November 2nd, 2004, Theo van Gogh was killed by Mohamed Bouyeri. I intensely remember that train ride from Brussels to Utrecht. And again, I was not alone. Nadia Fadil was with me. I remember that train ride, the nerves of the defense, the excitement of meeting you, and the dread of which state I would find the country in that was just in its early stages of its end of tolerance madness. And so the public event with you and with the other Erasmus Prize recipients, with the 3 important figures from the Islamic world, that happened in a historical church in the very center of Amsterdam, in attendance of the royal family, was drenched in nervousness, the nervousness of a high security event. In the midst of all of this, you were majestic. You remained untouched. You could say aloof. You observed. You decided which issues you wanted to talk about and which ones you did not, like my question. You had your agenda. You were not easily framed. You were not easily framed. In our seminar, you talked about the youth, you talked about the future, and you told stories of women and of young people you had been talking to in Morocco in the previous years. You told stories. And I have racked my brain to think about what you said precisely that made an impression, and I could not remember. And slowly it dawned on me that it might not have been so much about what you said, but it was about your presence, about the storytelling. And all of a sudden, I felt again some of that power that I had felt when I first read you 10 years earlier. This power, I came to understand, is the power of the word. There is much power in the way you write. Earlier this year, on March 8th, on an evening dedicated to you at the Kai Theater, organized by Jamila Idrissi, I began my speech with these words of you, about writing. And I want to repeat those words. Writing is one of the most ancient forms of prayer. To write is to believe communication is possible, that other people are good, that you can awaken their generosity and their desire to do better. When I met you, I discovered this power all over again, but in the flesh, the power of storytelling. Now, bear with me. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, Jesus says to his disciples, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them." Now, don't get me wrong. I do not want to compare you to Jesus here. And I actually think that all of us should have a variation of that verse in our own name. Fatima, I have discovered, and I keep on discovering, your version of this verse. And it goes something like this. When 2 or more of you are gathered together in my name, when you come together to tell stories to each other, And with the you here, you mean lots of women. Not only women, but lots of women come together and tell stories to each other. I will be listening. I will be smiling. I will be hearing echoes of my stories run through your stories. And I will hear echoes of older stories, and I will hear the seeds of new stories. And I will be whispering more stories in your ears. And there will be community, with differences and disagreements. The power of the word in its written form and in its spoken form, in its storytelling form, is how you have marked me most, Fatima. And it is a power you have shared generously and cultivated among others. For this, I thank you, Fatima. Shukran.